this is just a must. Put me in perspective, I'm the deepest in the cut. Everybody
I hear him chat in the noise, move too quick, can't stop for the talking. I hear him chat with the boys, man so tough, but man's keep walking. Just too sharp with the prize, my girls better tell me I'm awesome, yeah. Hot like fire on the pan, if you wanna touch my please use caution. Cold like 0 degrees, I'm out the cage, gotta let out the beast. Revolutionary guy, get out the streets. Locked in the cage, I'ma let out the wake up, get out the sheets. We came for one man, forget my peace. We take the west side, take on the east. I'ma put him in the cage, never let out the yeah, I hear him chat in the noise, move too quick, can't stop for the talking. I hear him chat with the boys, man so tough, but man's keep walking, yeah. Just too sharp with the prize, like girls better tell me I'm awesome, yeah. Hot like fire on the pan, if you wanna touch my please use caution.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mount Phenom tournament. I'm, of course, Simo. Alongside me is Joshi, who I swear I saw scan in medbay. I think he's clean. He's not the imposter. We're about to get into some 2v2 action, Joshi. Are you as excited as I am?
I'm so excited for this, Simo. We got a whole lot of great League of Legends action for you today. We got this 2v2 before we jump into our full 5v5. And as we look at this, it's going to be really exciting to see how these guys play up against each other. Because if you're paying attention, 3 of these guys are actually going to be playing from the same team from our 5v5 tournament later. And Swifta, Maddie, and Enigma are really going to have to show who's boss and maybe who actually gets to shot call later on in today's games.
Yeah, and, it's really also going to show the prowess of who's, a standout performer on the team. Yeah, we don't get a look at the full roster, but at least we get an inside glimpse as to who is really capable of bringing that 1v1 or that 2v2 prowess. Is it, the top mid duo? Is it the bot lane? Is it a part of the bot lane? Is it a component of the support of the ADC? We all get an inside look here at the 2v2 tournament, which... we should have a look at the format just to see what it is that we're going to be expecting or what we should have expected yesterday from that 2v2 tournament that obviously broke down to now just 2 final teams. The format, of course, is 2v2, obviously, but it's 2 kills, first to 100 CS or first turret. Normally in 1v1 tournaments, you see that same kind of condition, but the fact of the matter is that there's 2 kills that you can now kind of alleviate. It puts the 2v2 into a very interesting position. I wonder, I mean, I'd have to double check with the production. If one player dies, is that one player now alone, or can he respawn and join the fray?
Oh no, you can
probably
come
should have asked
back,
that before.
Simo, every single time. I mean, the big important
Yeah.
thing we got to pay attention to here is since we are doing it on Howling Abyss as well, that's the only way
Yeah.
to go back and spend your gold. You have to die, you have to get killed in order to actually have a chance. It's very different doing it here on the Howling Abyss rather than on Summoner's Rift, and I'm curious to see how it actually affects things because the turrets also do different damage amounts to the minions as you get close, and a lot of the rhythms that your AD carries, mid laners, and top laners are used to in order to make sure that you can actually get some of these auto attacks down are going to be a little bit different than what they've been used to seeing, and maybe the jugglers might actually do a little bit better in CSing because they don't care about that stuff.
Yeah, it's true. And, you also have to consider what type of champion selection does come through with the 2v2 challenge. But before we hop off this graphic, important to note that the prize pool, $1,000 for a 2v2 tournament. It's not something I think we normally see. $500 for first place. And on the opposite side, I believe I saw a $2,500 5v5 tournament. But we'll, of course, we'll cross that bridge once we get there later on today. First, we've got to deal with this best of 3. And it wouldn't be possible without Award Pool. The place for gaming professionals with access to tools, teams, events, and contacts. It's just a great place for you to host your tournament, and then from there, have your players have a phenomenal time playing through it, which is actually what we're using to for the 2v2 tournament and for the 5v5 tournament. So a great tool, great piece of software that is accessible to anyone. So sign up today. I'm assuming awardpool.com will get you exactly where you need to go. And yeah, so before we get into this 2v2, Joshi, let's have a quick chat about what are some of the different champion selections that you might kind of run into. You could go through a sustain lane, you could go towards a kill lane, you could try to poke them out. Like, there's a lot of different options that you have. So what are some of the things that you are thinking about immediately? Like, okay, 2v2, what is the most efficient way to take care of this?
I mean, yeah, there's basically 2 basic ways to try and go about playing the 2v2. You got the degenerate players like me who are going to try and win off of 100 CS and zoning you off. Then you got the exciting players. You're going to be playing the kill lanes, right? This is where you're going to be seeing things like the Leona, double melees. But on the other hand, there's opportunities to play really long-range champions, and I'm sure when we used to watch Magma Chamber, we used to seeing things like the Caitlyn and Annie, things with absolutely massive ranges that are very difficult to deal with. Right now, since these guys have played so much together, again, Maddie, Enigma, and Swift have been playing on the same team. They know each other's tendencies as they start to go through this, and we're starting to see that people are looking to play a little bit more aggressively. Lucian, Lee Sin, Akali, and Bard are all characters that are going to be actually trying to fight the opponents rather than trying to push them away from the CS and build an advantage that way.
I do have to point out that I'm very familiar with Pax. He, for quite some time, has been a part of the Ryerson League of Legends esports roster. I've seen him in the top lane. It's been a while. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like he's been around the scene for quite some time, at least for the Toronto scene. So he's definitely very deserving of this 2v2 spot, this finalist spot. So we can expect some great things out of him. The rest of the team, I think I've seen Swift's name before somewhere around the amateur scene. It's not something it doesn't feel like it's not familiar. We're about to get through our first pick,
these guys before,
Kindred.
Simo.
Yes, you're right. A few weeks
Yeah,
ago.
North by
the
Northeast was the last
Northeast.
time we saw these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's a bit of a
Kindred's
surprise to
locked
me,
in.
I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah, it's a little strange. Pantheon, I
It does a
expect, but
lot of
Kindred.
damage. Yeah, so as you're going through, like, the Pantheon, it has the engage tools, it does a lot of early damage, and it has a lot of artificial tankiness with the shield that it's able to put up on the E. Kindred does a lot of damage, has a lot of burst off of the third auto attack coming in from the E, but doesn't have the same kind of survivability and is really relying on hitting level 6. Where on the other hand, Pantheon Syndra, this is a fairly common bottom lane that we're starting to see pop up as this brutal kill lane. You get one stun down, the other one becomes guaranteed, and the burst between these two champions makes it very difficult for swishy champions like this Kindred to even function.
So I'm also noticing that they're only going through three bands a pop. I'm assuming because there's 2 players on both sides, you don't get the full 5 bands, or it might just be in the rule set that you can't have access to 5 bands, because I have a feeling that you could just destroy somebody's pool one at a time. And they just would have nothing to play. So I mean I understand that, but looking at this already, like I feel like I've got to give it directly to Enigma and to Maddie, just based on the quote-unquote draft. Like, I know that this is a draft for a 2v2, not a draft for a 5v5, but it just feels like the Pantheon and the Syndra, like, those are champions that you expect in a 1v1 and a 2v2 scenario that do extremely well. But, I do have to kind of give it at least a little bit to Swifta and Pax. The Kindred's going to help nullify that at level 6 regardless. They're not going to get bursted down if Swifta can time the ultimate correctly and put, of course, Pax in a great position to survive as well. But I think it's still Pantheon and Syndra that are going to have a phenomenal early game that can really threaten an early pick before level 6, which is where Swifta and Pax finds a little bit of safety.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're talking about. This Rek'Sai doesn't do anything at level 1. You're playing against 1.5 range champions between the Syndra and the Pantheon. Pantheon's going to be sitting there chucking spears, and Rek'Sai is going to be throwing out that Prey Seeker every now and then, doing a little bit of damage, but it doesn't compare to what Pantheon's able to put out. It doesn't have their survivability. And at level 2, when you get the ability to either dash in or burrow unburrow, doesn't really help you all that much either, because you don't have the knockup. Or you don't have the gap closer. So you have to be very careful because Syndra and Pantheon are going to be spiking fairly hard at that time. And that's kind of why I was surprised to see Swifta and Pax going for this strategy. It definitely feels like Maddie and Enigma are, as the laners, a little bit more familiar with how to actually manage the wave and have a more cohesive strategy.
And one of the other things that it's surely not really, I think, going to matter a lot. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm just wrong. But like not having the ability to farm up the marks there for Kindred, which is something that really sets her right into that mid to late game. Well, Joshi, that doesn't exist in a 2v2 in a 1v1 format. You can't get there. You're not going to be able to just go off into the jungle, get your marks, get the scuttle, get those Krugs, get that Gromp and in the enemy jungle. You don't have access to that. You only have access to probably one mark. And what's that difference maker going to be? It's not a lot. You're not going to find yourself in 3,000 extra damage in your back pocket. That's just not how that works. And so for for Kindred, it's all going to be just based on her stats and whatever items they end up going for first. I think that's the next thing that we can start to dive through. What types of items are you expecting in those early purchases? Because I don't think that they can recall. So that first item, very, very important to get, at least for both these laners.
Yeah, it's going to tell us a lot about how these guys want to play, and I'm looking at fairly standard buys coming out from Syndra and Pantheon, probably a Serrated Dirk from the Pantheon, and maybe a Lost Chapter from Syndra. The extra mana regen that it does provide is incredibly impactful. But the person who I'm really curious to see how they build is going to be this Kindred, right? Because you have a bunch of different options. You can pick up things like the Recurve Bow for a little bit more attack speed and on-hit damage. You can go with the Serrated Dirk because it makes that wake up really, really powerful if you're ever able to get 3 auto attacks on a single target. But you could also go for something like a Vampiric Scepter in order to make sure that you're going to be staying healthy throughout this entire time. But you have to pick one of these items. You don't have enough gold to do a whole lot more than that. So any of these items plus boots is really what I'm expecting from the Kindred. The Rek'Sai, the Guardian's Horn, maybe? It's an ARAM only item. It's like the equivalent of Doran's Shield that gives you a lot of health regen and damage reduction, because I can't think of a single item that you could afford with the 1400 gold that you're given off the bat that Rek'Sai is particularly excited about.
I mean, if you're Pantheon, you could just stack Reju beads and hope for the best. You know, you could just, I'm going to sustain through this. You're not taking me down. No, I mean, of course, he's going to obviously buy something else. I'm just trying to project my wishes onto him, you know, and looking at, let's say, some of these win conditions. We don't have a siege composition on either side. No one's going to be touching that turret, I think, for quite some time. If we look at the CS, they're both going to struggle to CS, I think, to some extent. Syndra's going to have a little bit of a better time. I think Kindred has to be within a closer range than most quote-unquote ADCs. I mean, Kindred's not an ADC, but still acts like one in terms of being at range and using attack damage to do damage. And so CSing isn't going to be a big win condition, I think, for either side. And it's ultimately going to boil down to, I think, a 2v2 finish. It's going to have to be the kills that either team wins off of.
Wow.
And we'll see how that, of course, unfolds. What are you saying wow about?
Look at all these Guardian items coming through. The Guardian's Hammer, Horn, and the, I don't remember what this orb is called that Syndra has, but notably, they've all gone with this. They've all valued the potions really, really highly, and at the same time, neither of your ranged characters have taken Flash. You have Barrier Exhaust on Swifta and Exhaust Ignite coming out from Enigma, so you're going to have to be very careful. You're not going to have an opportunity to run away, and so we have to watch Pax and Maddie very, very carefully because they have all the engaged tools and there are no escapes coming in from either of these back rifles. And as we start to go in, gotta pay attention to the CS, gotta see who gets the first push, because remember, unlike on Summoner's Rift, the minions don't spawn equally. You get the first cannon minion to spawn on the blue side as we already see a fight.
Ooh, they're going in. That's going to be the exhaust knock up onto Maddie. He's going to start to retreat, but the flash means they want to seal the deal. First blood for Pax. And now already things are looking grim for mid jungle gap. That was, you blink and you miss it, Joshi. You blink and you miss it. Ignite exhaust, and he's as good as dead.
Yeah, that's crazy. I was saying that the wake-up coming in from Swifta was going to be absolutely monstrous if you get the 3 auto attacks, and locking down Maddie for just long enough in order to grab that's going to be really big. But Maddie, having a chance to back, still has his Ignite up, and now the Health Relic already going in favor of Swifta and Pax. This is looking pretty tough. You've used up a lot of your tools in order to keep yourself alive, and now we have to see if all the health potion that Maddie has in his inventory is going to matter at all, because they're missing out on a lot of other tools. And not only are they going to be having the kill lead, but they're going to have a CS lead at the end of all of this as well, as you see Pax is able to go in and get a lot of damage down onto the minions as well.
You know, that's something that I think was a little missed maybe from our part, not anticipating how much damage this combination is going to do. Because normally, let's be honest with ourselves, Joshi, you see one or the other on the Rift. You see the Rek'Sai or you see the Kindred. Very rarely do these two meet on the same team together because they're both junglers, you know, for the most part. And so to see them in combination working together, that's a lot of damage that came through very quickly onto Maddie. I don't even think he personally anticipated how much damage that was going to be onto him. And so now you're seeing a little bit more respect come through from the side of mid jungle gap.
Yeah, and you see it coming out in the runes that they've chosen to go for as well. The Keystones. Swifta, you know, he had options here. He could have gone for the Halo Blades, he could have gone for the Fleet Footwork, but he chooses to go for the Press the Attack, and Pax with the Halo Blades, a very standard choice on the Rek'Sai as well. They're looking to really use all of the early game damage from Pax as they jump on him really quickly, but they're not going to get that much damage down.
You know, one of the things that I think I might have to ask you if we get a little bit of a break before this next match, because they're actually looking for the finisher, Enigma! Oh, baby! Oh, just as they hit level 6, now that's, of course, going to be the 2-0 finish. Top gap complete. Round number 1, it's a best of 3, so they're already on series point here. What a phenomenal play. I was just going to mention, before they so rudely interrupted by finishing this first game, why not the Conqueror? You know, versus the Press the Attack. Conqueror, I mean, I guess if you're looking for the burst, like you might want to finish in that style, but the Conqueror seems to be just, you throw that on anybody and they'll succeed. So why would they not have gone for the Conqueror instead of Press the Attack here?
Well, as we've been seeing today, Simo, Conqueror is not going to matter if you're not even going to be getting the healing off. These fights are going over so quickly that you're not actually going to be benefiting from the extra AD. The true damage doesn't matter. And the Press the Attack, the one thing that it doesn't do like the Halo Blades does, where Halo Blades amplifies your attack speed and gets a bunch of auto attacks all at once, the Press the Attack allows you to amplify your teammates' damage as well. So not only are you getting that burst of damage, that 3-hit passive doubling up with the Press the Attack and Kindred's E, but you're also allowing Rek'Sai to burst even harder than they already do. And I think something that surprised us a little bit, or I guess surprised me because I forgot this is true, you don't start at level 1 on Howling Abyss.
Oh,
you start at level 3.
yeah.
You don't need to worry about Rek'Sai not having any of these abilities at the beginning of the game. So yet another difference coming through that comes to show that Swift and Pax really came to play in ways that I definitely was not expecting.
Yeah, and you know, kind of like doubling back to what we saw in terms of the ban phase. I forget what that third one was. Oh, it's Lucian. They banned Lee Sin, Nocturne, and Lucian, so they didn't want to give any opposing engage tools for the side of mid-jungle gap either, right? Taking off the Lee Sin, who can get in there very quickly. Lucian, who, especially at level 3, has got a pretty nasty combo that can do quite a lot of damage, very similar to the opposite side in what we saw with Rek'Sai and Kindred. Hurt very, very quickly. And so we'll see if the ban changes, if those bans change. Of course, on the opposite side, they took off the Akali, the Bard, and LeBlanc. And now I understand LeBlanc. I think the Bard could definitely be sneaked through if you wanted to, if you want to get rid of the Kindred or the Rek'Sai. I don't think Bard would have as much of an impact as Kindred or Rek'Sai did in this particular instance. And if you break up that composition, then they have to go with something else ultimately. So that might be an option for the banning phase. But again, we're just going to have to see. It's series point. We could be over in a matter of seconds, very similar to how that first match went. And that 500 smackaroos going to be in the pockets of Top Gap very quickly. But this is exciting. I wish this was like a best of 5. This would have been so cool.
Yeah, I mean, we see the Bard band once again. Bard gives you a lot of sustain on the Howling Abyss that you would otherwise be lacking, simply because their health regen is cut a little bit. There's not as much opportunities to heal. You're really focused on getting those health relics. And I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up staying with the Nocturne band as well, simply because it pushes so uninteractively, it forces people underneath the turret, and it's very difficult to dive onto a Nocturne with his spell shield and his ability to heal off the wave. But as we go through, bans are staying relatively similar. The Lucian Lee Sin once again banned by Swifta and Pax, and the Bard banned just as last time for Maddie and Enigma, but the Pantheon, they're banning it away despite being the ones who picked it up last game.
Yeah, interesting to see kind of the shoe on the other foot in this instance. Top Gap looking to now pinch kind of. I mean, they still have the Lucian, they still have the Lee Sin, but it's the Kindred that is finally taken down. But the Pantheon, something that I believe you had mentioned, Maddie and Enigma playing in that previous map, in that previous game. Now that's taken off the board for them. So this draft already going to be different, and I'm excited to see what comes through. The last ban about to be entered in here by Swifta, likely going to be the Nocturne if they're going to stay true to what they had originally planned, and first pick going over to mid-jungle gap.
And I wonder if mid-jungle gap are going to go with a similar strategy to what they did before, now this LeBlanc was something that they banned when they were on the red side. I wonder if that's something that they are looking to pick up once they have an opportunity here. We saw how powerful people like Knight can be, ignoring a lot of the minion autos, but it is a little bit risky. Maddie is going to be very squishy, so we got to pay attention to what Swifta and Pax are going to pick up, because they have similar kill tools. Swifta has an opportunity. It's very easy to track where LeBlanc is going to be going, and Zakali doesn't have as much burst early on in the game, but can be very obnoxious to deal with. So there's lots of sustain coming through on the top gap side.
Not to mention that top gap, they weren't able to pick this up last time as it was banned from the side of mid Jung. So Akali actually sneaking through, and Pax, I think, going to stay and stick with the Rek'Sai there, and Swifta off of the Kindred now on to the Akali, unless they for some reason decide to swap. But the Olaf, this is something that I think is going to be very interesting. Unfortunately, similar to the previous scenario, I think it is level 6 once again that is going to put mid Jung in a very comfortable position. But considering we start at level 3, LeBlanc and Olaf still going to have the tools that are necessary to get a good early rolling start if they can get in the right engagement. But once again, we're not in a burst scenario from the side of mid Jung gap, but it's actually top gap that is once again in a little bit of a burst scenario. You mentioned Akali being a little bit more of a pest as opposed to, you know, the one that's going to be doing the bursting at least early on, but still having that Rek'Sai there. We saw how much damage was comboed with the Kindred. Now it's just going to be Akali who, that's an assassin. So the burst question is still there. They're still going to be able to do it. The question is, can they get it done against a very mobile LeBlanc and a very beefy and tanky life-stealing Olaf?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's difficult to burst as Olaf with the amount of lifesteal that he has. I'm expecting a Kali to go with something a little bit different. You normally see like a fleet footwork picked up on this champion, but due to the nature of this game, I'm expecting an electrocute instead. And last game, we feared for Manny. He ended up being both of his team's deaths when he was playing the Pantheon, because he's the melee champion. He's the one that you can jump on. But now that he's on the Olaf, a
Yeah.
little bit tankier, a little bit more sustained,
Yes.
I'm actually really worried for Enigma, because you think of LeBlanc as being tricky, but if you're going to get on top of that champion, it's going to be lights out very quickly.
Yeah, it's ultimately, I think, going to boil down to Akali and Enigma, how they play around each other. Because I mean, for the side of Rek'Sai versus Olaf, like they're just gonna point and click at each other. There's really nothing to be said or done about that. But the mobility of the LeBlanc and the Akali, it's gonna boil down to who's mechanically better in that matchup, or in working in tandem with their partner, right? The Akali and the LeBlanc both extremely mobile, and not to mention Akali has that added factor of being uh, just sitting in the clouds there, just sitting in the smoke, not being visible, being very difficult to target, very difficult to also predict, especially at a level that like I don't think everyone here is a challenger, right? They're all like grandmaster or master or diamond or something like that. They're not Night 9 level, okay? They're not Night 9 level. They're just some amazing Canadian talent, and we're still seeing that shine through here today.
Yeah, I think the big thing that you got to pay attention to, though, is that when you are in the shroud, you can't get auto attacked. So Olaf going to be a lot more reliant on actually landing these axes. Obviously, they're such a powerful tool. If you catch a Kali out with no shroud up, you're able to chase them down pretty effectively. But I think we got potentially a either incredibly fast game on our hands, as one of these teams runs over the other pretty quickly, or we might actually have a
Yes.
little bit more of a patient game where we got to start paying a little bit more attention to who's actually going to be controlling the health relics this time around.
Yeah, we saw a little bit more control, I think, to the side of top gap. They constantly forced it, did not give mid Jung an opportunity to take it. And I think there's a little bit of an initial health boost once you grab it. So even though mid Jung was still able to share in the spoils of the redemption act of the health relic, it was always top gap that was ending up taking it. So they got whatever initial boost it did end up giving to themselves. And so um, I think that's an important thing to know. The health relic can be very handy, especially if it goes down to the sub 100 HP battle and both survive. That is something that needs to be controlled and to give either team the edge when it comes to getting back into that game. And obviously, as you saw in that previous match, if you die, you can come back to lane and you can get right back into the fray trying to win the 2v2. And I think the only thing that we can even mention about that is you have the ability to go back, buy something else, buy something additional. It's not going to be a lot. Like, it's not going to, you're not going to go from like a rod to a Luden's Echo in a matter of one back after you die. It's more so a matter of what additional item can you get that can help push you over the edge. Is it a sword? Is it a cloth armor? Is it some more potions? And we're going to be paying attention to that because someone's going to have to die. It may be both of them at the same time. It might be one of them gets singled out, and we'll see that as we are just underway in match number 2 of this best of 3.
Yeah, this could be it. I'm curious to see what they end up doing. Once again, a lot of Guardians items, and look at all these Reju beads coming out, Simo. I know that's something that's got to make you a little bit happier, but they're both going to be running through once again, and now you notice that the only person with Flash on this entire map is going to be Swifta, and the value the Flash knockup from Rek'Sai is going to be bringing is too much to ignore, but interestingly enough, Pack's actually going in.
Wow. Oh man, that's gonna be so annoying. I'm already tilted for mid Jung gap. That was a decent chunk of damage. Yes, the Reju beads are about to be in full swing, but I think top gap are definitely feeling themselves, especially Pax picking up that Akali and now being in a very comfortable position to do some damage. And Pax on the Rek'Sai last time. Now they've seemed to have swapped roles, and we'll see if Swifta can have that similar impact. But I just expect top gap to constantly poke them off of the wave here, and we'll see what, of course, does end up happening.
Oh, they're already going in.
Oh, wow, they want to get that knock-up in. Will they have enough damage? That's actually Swifta that's taking dangerous little. Can he survive? No, he cannot, but Manny on the opposite side, of course, is also in trouble. Pax now on the retreat, down to just single digits as this Enigma will likely take him down here. Oh, Pax! Oh, the chain doesn't connect. Pax on the retreat.
Oh, no,
but
the
Enigma,
turret!
oh my goodness, the turret! It was so darn close. But I think that goes to mid Jung there. Very, very close matchup. But, we saw the Olaf in full swing. You blink and you miss it, Joe. She already were on series point, one apiece. One team's going away with $500.
This is why I said I was worried for Enigma. I wasn't really worried for the Olaf whatsoever. He has the barrier. He's going to be able to keep himself pretty healthy throughout that entire thing. And you saw how long it took to bring him down. This is why I was expecting the Akali to bring Electrocute or something that's going to give them a little bit more burst damage. They took the fleet footwork, expecting a longer lane and expecting the sustain to really help them out. But then they instantly all in. They were the ones who chose to go for that fight. They thought they saw a small opening, and unfortunately for these two guys, they were just incorrect. You can't burst an Olaf that early on in the game. You gotta burn him down a little bit. You gotta use the strengths of your champion and not just give over a first game to your opponents. And now that means we just get to go to game 3 to see which of these two teams is actually going to be taking home the $500.
And I mean, we've got to touch on that. This is all about adapting. Olaf wasn't even a pick nor a ban in that first match, and then now as we enter into the second, now it's kind of one of those things where, like, you're in a 2v2. What are you going to bring to the table? What do you have in your back pocket? I mean, yes, you can look up all the OPGGs and you could look up all the different statistics, but it looks like they're bringing something completely new, something completely fresh to something that they are not used to playing in solo queue. And that's fine because we're seeing success on both sides as we are now, of course, at serious point. It all boils down to this. Pax and Swifta, you can definitely feel and see that they were confident entering into that match. They got some early poke down and they hopped in, got a little bit more involved. But as you mentioned, Olaf, he was just such a great front line, even better than Pantheon in that previous match. He was able to just sustain so much more with the word there and with the blood on the wall. It was the sustain. He was able to sustain a lot of that damage, keep himself alive with the lifesteal that he has in his kit and the Reju beads. And now we'll see if it gets through. I don't think that's something I want to get through.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is that I like the Olaf pick as a response to the double melee champions that are coming in from the other side. Olaf loves fighting against other melee champions. He's the one who's going to be paying a lot more attention to all of the different things that these melees are going to actually be bringing. On the other hand, though, with the Olaf already banned, it allows Swift and Pax to once again look for potentially a double melee composition.
The Akali and the LeBlanc, of course, taken off the table. And that is something that mid Jung Gap banned on the red side as well. They got the LeBlanc off. They didn't want it first picked, and I think that's important to know. But it's back to the Kindred. We'll see if mid Jung, like, I don't know if Rek'Sai's in their pool, but that will be something very nifty to pick up here just to get it out of the way. Because I think this is what Top Gap are going back to. And ultimately, what do mid Jung answer? It's not going to be the Pantheon or the Syndra. Please don't give me that again. What are you going to be able to do against that burst? How can you sustain it? The Olaf is off the table. What do you have? Okay, Joshi, I'm not even gonna touch that. I'm not even gonna touch the Nico. That's all you, baby. You gonna balls in your court. I have no idea why this is picked up.
Very interesting champion. Now, normally in longer games, Nico can be a pretty good counter pick into the Kindred simply because of the way that your two ultimates interact. You stay alive in order to actually get the ultimate off. But this time, it's interesting to me because it says, Nico says slow play. Lee Sin says fast play. And you look at Top Gap, and based on what they've done previously, they play fast. So Nico, the ability to get away and use that W in order to have an opportunity to run away from both of these potentially like mid-range engaging champions is going to be crucial in actually keeping them alive. But last time, again, we said I was worried for the range champion. I was worried for Enigma on the LeBlanc. They weren't the ones that ended up getting jumped on. They were the ones who were able to sit back and use their auto attacks throughout this entire thing. But now, with the Nico and the Lee Sin coming through, I'm curious to see if Lee Sin actually has the HP to keep themselves alive when Kindred and Rek'Sai choose to dive in.
It's a big question. You know, Lee Sin was off the table for, I think, both matches, banned by either side, taken out of commission. Actually, it's been banned every single time by Top Gap to make sure that they don't let that through. And we're about to see if that was for good reason or not, because they let it slip. They wanted to take the Olaf instead of the Lee Sin, and we understand now why. I mean, Maddie very comfortable on it, has a majority of his games played this season on the Olaf, 299 games. Yeah, makes a whole lot of sense why you banned it in the third map there to the great effect that it had in that previous map. So it all boils down to this, the Lee Sin versus the Nico. And already, you know, I'm looking at this Lee Sin. I'm thinking about the interaction with the Rek'Sai, the Sonic Wave. Okay, I'm going to go straight to the Rek'Sai. Boom, you get knocked up before you even get there. And now you're stuck in a 2v1 where Nico can't even follow through or follow up as quickly as you would hope. So the kind of mechanics of how the 2v2 is going to unfold really depends on mid Jung playing, I think, perfectly. And Top Gap can play in a way suboptimally and still have great success considering, I think, the quote unquote draft advantage I feel they have here, because we saw it work well. And I think compared to the Syndra and the Pantheon, mid Jung have drafted something, I think, worse than the Pantheon and the Syndra. I think they had more tools to deal with Kindred and Rek'Sai in that match. And they lost that one. So what do you
Yeah,
think?
I'm pretty surprised by the Nico Lee Sin as well. It's definitely not something where they feel like it's particularly synergistic between their two kits. And again, Nico says to me slow play, Lee Sin says to me fast play. And the one thing that they do really provide is an opportunity to play a number of different ways, right? Lee Sin obviously loves fighting early on in the game, does a ton of damage, has decent survivability with the Safeguard and Iron Will, I believe it's called, to not only shield yourself, but also get yourself a bunch of spell vamp and lifesteal. But it's still not particularly tanky. It's not the Olaf. It doesn't have the same
Yeah,
kind of just like raw base
yeah.
HP. It's more reliant on actually doing damage to the other side in order to kill them rather than just sustain and win this battle of attrition. So I do agree. I really like Top Gap's composition this time. We'll see if it's enough to actually win them the $500 as we go into the last game of our 2v2 challenge here for Mount Phenom.
Just for like one quick second, entertain me. What would you have partnered up here with the Lee Sin instead of the Nico? Like, what would have been just the perfect storm for them to find their own little success in the draft up against Top Gap's Kindred and Rek'Sai?
I'm a degenerate player, Simo. I'm the kind of guy who's going to, every single time it's up, I'm going to be picking Caitlyn in 1v1s and 2v2s just because I have that
Okay.
range. I can
Okay.
poke at you from a
Yeah.
long way away. And
Yes.
I will eventually win on 100 CS because I will control the wave better than you do. But now we'll see. The Nico kind of does a little bit of that, right? You have the range. You have some pretty good auto attacks if you choose to go on hit. But oh, you got a lot of damage that you got to contend with. You got to keep yourself very safe, and I'm not sure Nico has the tools to do that up against what seems like a composition that they should have been expecting.
I think, depending on how these first few seconds, of course, unfold before, if we even last past the first wave, I think the win condition here for mid Jung Gap, try to get to level 6. I think that's really your best bet, your best success rate. Of course, there's going to be the Kindred ult to kind of counteract some of that damage, but if Lee Sin can displace her and get her out of there, and you could try to find some burst potential in that, you might actually find yourself looking down the barrel of a victory. So we'll see if Top Gap kind of force the issue. They obviously want the game to be done before level 6, or at least get one pick early to net themselves, the threat of winning the round. But for mid Jung Gap, man, you are waiting. You are waiting for level 6. You are not trying to fight early if you can help it.
Yeah, we'll see what they end up doing. Once again, Flash on Pax, Flash on Maddie. So the two range champions opting to take more combat summoners, less relying on the mobility. You're saying, hey, I'm not going to make this mistake. Already coming through, Pax and Swifta look to be waiting for their opponents. And oh gosh, Simo, there's two Lee Sins running out on the field. We'll see if they have an opportunity to trick anybody as they start going through, and they're just going to be poking out a little bit. Now, we do see the Conqueror coming up from Maddie. We'll see if he's actually able to get any value from that, because these fights are going so quickly. I'm not sure he's actually going to be able to get the full value of the Conqueror before the press the attack and the Hell of Blades potentially finish him off.
Yeah. Top Gap playing a little bit more respectively this time around. Usually we'll see them poised up aggressively, and respect, we'll see how long that lasts. It doesn't normally last very long with Top Gap, as they have round after round pushed the issue as soon as possible. But this time they're playing it slow. Already level 4. Likely the ability of their choosing has now hit level 2. A little bit more extra damage, but so far, just respect. Just respect.
Yeah, I'm surprised that we haven't seen this game end already, honestly. They're starting to be able to push this in. We'll see how many of these they can actually pick up underneath the turret. As the health relics do start to spawn, you do get a little bit of extra HP and mana to play with, which is only really helpful once again for our ranged champions, because they do have mana bars, unlike Lee Sin and Rek'Sai, which will allow them to out-sustain in the long term. But so many potions. Gotta pay attention, gotta make sure that you are sustaining up at this point, and we see small advantages going over in favor of Top Gap, as the wave does start to come into their side of the map, and they're the ones who are able to get the second health relic as well as have a small CS advantage. So everything going ever so slightly in favor of the blue team.
If we're going to just base this victory off of who has more potions, mid Jung do have the potion advantage. And that means that they could stay in for just a little bit extra than Top Gap. But for the most part, if we're talking relic control, so far it has been Top Gap with that relic control. CS, literally even. So can't really talk about a victory quite yet. But they're just about a quarter of the way there. And level 6 is just on the precipice here. And they're actually looking for that here. And it's the same interaction that I highlighted before we got into this match. Q goes in and he gets knocked up immediately, so he needs to be a little bit more careful. But they're looking for a little bit of a re-engage as they have their ultimates available. So far, once again, we're just back at this standstill.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting spot. You can see that Swift actually used his exhaust in that last engage, whereas Maddie and Enigma didn't actually use any summoners whatsoever. They're able to grab the health relic as well, and now as we're seeing these waves bounce back and forth, you're seeing something that you don't actually see all that often come into play, because Kindred doesn't lane very often, but her ability to sustain with those auto attacks basically has a fleet footwork built into her kit. After every so often, you just get a little bit of auto attack, heal yourself up, and now Maddie, I mean, he hasn't been using his potions as much. He's been relying a little bit more on the health relics. We'll see if it's going to be enough, because Enigma has yet to land one of these snares. Level 7.
I'm now noticing that it was the exhaust that dissuaded Maddie from continuing forward. I thought the knock-up, he was just like, I'm going to get out of there, but I think they actually would have survived with the knock-up, to be quite honest. They didn't really need to exhaust, especially since they were under turret. Maybe just a little bit of a miscommunication, but Maddie definitely was looking for the kick back over to Enigma. To alley-oop the play, maybe get the first pick here off the table. But so far, 4 minutes in, barely any action, and now the CS lead is starting to really balloon. See if this wave kind of bounces back for the side of mid-Jung, but considering they're being a little zoned off, It's dangerous. Pax down to a little bit of low HP. Definitely the HP advantage going to the favor of mid Jung, but this poke is starting to hurt from Enigma.
Yeah, it really is. There's also a health relic back behind them, so Pax is going to be able to back away and keep himself healed up. He's got another one if he wants to go even further behind his own tower, but they want to make sure that they get this wave to crash. He does come back. Enigma and Maddie continuing just kind of poke out a little bit, and the only snare that has landed has benefited mid Jung Gap really heavily. They got a ton of damage. Force Pax use the last of his potions. As they trade back and forth, this one might actually end up going to CS, and we're seeing small advantages slowly building up for Swift and Pax.
Oh, that was a little close. I think it was a decent opportunity, but Maddie does not want to take any risks. At series point, they know Top Gap. They've played with them before. These guys are teammates, for crying out loud. They know kind of the inner workings, the inner positioning, micro and macro decisions that both teams are going to make. So, better to be risk adverse. Don't take any risks that you don't need to take. Maddie, oh, that's going to be the opportunity, and the cake actually lands on the Pax. That was beautiful. Enigma will follow up with the alley-oop, but he gets out of position. They've survived so much of that damage. Maddie now going to find himself on the return end of the graveyard, and Enigma left to see his friend fall to the wayside. Kill point, series point for Top Gap.
Yeah, that was huge. The fact that the Pop Blossom didn't hit anybody. Pax was able to flash out. Swifter was just out of range the entire time. And now we'll have to see Pax going relatively low. They actually commit the ultimate from Swifter. I don't know if I like him living here, because now the next fight that comes through, he's not going to have any HP to play with at all. He's going to be incredibly reliant on these health relics, and I think if he had died, he would have had an opportunity to go back and buy some items. You see Lee Sin is walking back into the lane with a Phage.
Okay, we have to also highlight the tabbies that came through. That's going to hurt exceptionally. And we've got stopwatch on both sides available and ready, so they can mitigate a lot of damage if they played this masterfully. Ultimate's not available quite yet. The Dragon's Rage is quite far away from being up and at him. And so while they do have the kill advantage, I think Top Gap might actually lose here if mid Jung play this perfectly. They can dive, they can, you know, change aggro with the stopwatch if played perfectly. They don't have a lot of summoners to work with, and that's going to be kind of the downfall. But really, neither does Top Gap. Just one barrier for Swifta, and that's it. So pressure is on for Top Gap to survive this and find one more pick or close out the CS, because we're definitely near that spot as well.
Yeah, this is why I said I wasn't super thrilled on the fact that Pax chose to live in that last engagement, because he needs access to a lot more tools. He's just down a ton of stats between him and the Lee Sin, and we'll see if it's going to end up hurting them in the long run. The ultimates for everybody but Kindred are back up, and that's partly because they chose, in order to keep this Rek'Sai alive, they committed the Lamb's Respite in order to deny that kill away, but now it's just so desynced from the rest of the fight. I think there are opportunities for Maddie and Enigma to not only push this under turret and deny a lot of health relics, but potentially even look for a dive relatively soon. Oh, they go.
There's also the CS possibility that might come through. They're very close to 100. But Maddie, he's dangerously low. The ultimate, it's popped. That's going to be the ultimate for Pax. Oh, the stopwatch comes through. But Maddie, can he survive? Yes, he can. And now it's on the return. Pax in so much trouble. Now they're going to turn things back around. Swifter doing so much damage to both Enigma and Maddie. But look at the CS. It's nearing in. Pax can retreat back to the health relic. Swifter in a lot of trouble now as the Sonic Wave might be taken here by Maddie, but now they're going to re-engage. They don't want to go down to CS. They want to find this last pick, but they're dangerously low, and mid Jung Gap are starting to retrieve some of that health that they initially lost. But we're just literally under 10 CS for both sides, and we're at the 100, so they want to fight. Here it comes. Pax with a knock-up. Maddie in so much trouble. He bit off too much that he could not chew, and Top Gap are your victors. Pax and Swifta, backs against the wall, up on the ropes. They will come out victorious in a very, unfortunately, anticlimactic fashion, but it was a definitely close game, at least to close us off. And I'm happy about that. Happy about it. It was a close match.
Maddie took
First
so
two
many
games.
turret shots.
Yeah.
Man, he took so many turret shots. That was such a rough situation. I think he was expecting to back out with his team after he went under, but it was just so much. They lost so much HP, and I feel like they really had a potential checkmate situation. But unfortunately, Fortunately for Maddie, it is going to be going over to their opponents. They're going to have an opportunity to show us exactly what they have later on in the day. It sounds like we're going to be jumping into a replay here in just a moment as we have these 2v2s. Man,
need to take Maddie. Oh, that's going to be the opportunity, and the kick actually lands on the Pax. That was beautiful. Enigma will follow up with the alley-oop, but he gets out of position. They've survived so much of that damage. Maddie now going to find himself on literally under 10 CS for both sides, and we're at the 100, so they want to fight. Here it comes. Pax with a knockup. Maddie in so much trouble. He bit off.
there you have it.
You know what casters always say, Joshi? You know what casters always say? They hate hearing the sound of their own voice. That was
They're gonna say, don't do math on stream.
Yeah, don't do math on stream. Yes, don't do math on stream. But you know, first two matches were very quick to end, and I'm glad we ended on a note that was two win conditions threatened. There was, of course, the one more pick for Top Gap. The CS was down to just 10. And I know neither team wanted it to go down to that. And to be quite honest, Mid-Jung were closer to it. If they had just literally forced the CS instead of the fight, I mean, they would have won without honor. And so I appreciate them going for the fight at least. But of course, Top Gap, even though they were up against the ropes, they were still able to land that knockout punch. What a great day for some 2v2 action. We're going to throw, of course, to a quick break. But before we do, just a quick shout out to our sponsor, Award Pool, an automated end-to-end esports management platform for players, teams, leagues. Award Pool makes it easy to manage esports competitions from ticket sales and tournament buy-ins to awarding and managing winners. Award Pool offers gaming professionals the tools they need to level up with access to contact sponsorships and opportunities. That sounds pretty dope to me if I'm a player or a TO, a great place to get a lay of the land and set up your own community and set up your own tournament. So shout out to Award Pool for putting Mount Phenom together and helping us put some amazing action for you here on some esports weekends. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to throw it a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to dive right into the 5v5 tournament format that you were expecting today. I can't wait. We'll see you guys around the bend.
This is just for us now. We know I ain't